Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our second part of the online training course about data collection for mobility management. Today we will talk about the survey implementation, especially the preparation of the implementation. So what is highlighted in blue here, you can see we will discuss today. There's the definition of the target population, the sampling and recruitment procedure, the selection of the survey design, some thoughts about it, and the developing and testing of the survey tool. The other parts will be discussed in the third and last part of this online course. Start with the sampling. In principle, the sampling, we need to define the survey unit, so who we will ask. So for example, it could be more person, like a household, that you want to ask all the people of the household, or you have individual persons of a whole population like a city, or you have a specific group like in mobility management, expected that we have focusing on employees or customers or visitors, or maybe also public transport users is a subgroup of it. We need to define a sample size, so how many people I want to ask, that I can draw some conclusions and analyses. And we need the definition of the selection of the sampling procedure, so how we select the people for our sample. As soon as we cannot ask everyone, like for a whole city, we likely cannot ask everyone. Maybe in smaller companies you can also do a census. And for this, usually statistics recommends to do some random sampling. So you need for this a whole list of your targeted population you want to survey. So this is maybe the first thing what can exclude the option for random sampling for yourself. Then there is a random selection based on this complete list for the survey unit, and every unit should have the same chance of being included in the sample based on this list. So you usually choose a certain number of the sample on a random number. The advantage of random sampling versus non-random sampling is of course that we have these representatives that we can generalize the data and crossing up to the whole population. We can also do some statistical tests if the results are significant, and we can also calculate random error or statistics data on this. But of course, as I said, we need the whole list of the population, and it's more complex and expensive. So therefore, usually you do some non-random sampling, but you have to be aware of the disadvantages. There is a generalization and extrapolation is not possible based on the statements you collect, and you cannot do any statistical tests. So usually if you do a sampling, the first question came up, what should be the optimal sample size, and the bad news is that there is no sample size fits for all. But I can give you some hints how you can estimate the sample size fitting to your needs in your survey. The first thing is you need to think about your smallest group of your sample you want to analyze. So for example, there is the attitude of a specific working group like IT experts. Maybe you can also will also distinguish this to the gender, maybe the age group, maybe by their used mode of transport, behavior, and so on. And then very soon you come up with a very small size. And if you want to ensure that you have enough data in this group, you need a very big sample size. Another option is, in this sense, if you want to have this specific analysis, that you make a stratified sampling, so that you really collect and explore this specific group directly and choose a sample from this one to ensure that this group is included in your survey. But on the other hand, then the crossing up, it gets more tricky because you have to rebalance through a weighting procedure if you want to have general statements for the whole populations, if you do the stratified sampling procedure. In principle, if you want to calculate the sample size you need, maybe it goes a little bit beyond this online course, but if you screen in the internet for standard error, confidence interval calculation, statistical significance test, there is some information how to calculate these sample size. In general, I can say here is that the sample size is depending on the, first of all, the total population of your survey, the variance and the mean value of the expected data, and if the variables are discrete or continuous. So that means if you have a scoring from 1 to 5, not important to very important, or you have, this would be a discrete example for discrete variables, or you have continuous variable, for example, the distance of the commuters driven by a car from home to your working place. This would be an example for a continuous variable. If we are discussing the survey design, some thoughts on this. First of all, if we are asking for behavior of the people, usually it's always better to have revealed behavior data to collect instead of planned or intended behavior, if it's possible, of course. If you are asking for scenarios, they're not in the real world existing, then it's of course it's not possible to have revealed behavior. But if you're just asking which means of transport a specific person arrives at the company, for example, then it's better you ask very concrete for a specific day on a specific behavior in a defined situation, that people are clear themselves what to respond. Otherwise, if you are asking too generally, like the term usually, the people start thinking how to answer and what is usually and what is intended, for example. If you have pre-selected answers, usually you sort this by the likelihood of the given answer. So if you ask for the means of transport, people arriving at the company, for example, it's always good to have in the first, second, third row car, public transport, bicycle, and not maybe horse or cable car or any things. Usually you do not offer these very specific answer possibilities, but you always give an opportunity to have the category others with an open field where the people can reply on these exemptions of means of transport to avoid very long lists for the respondents to go through. This is an example of a behavior survey. Usually the reporting is based on a trip, on a very concrete day, for example, as I said before, and you ask for the location of the start, and then you collect some attributes like the start time, the trip purpose, transport mode, the location of the trip destination, ending time, and the distance driven, for example. Of course, sometimes you're maybe interested in specific attributes of this trip, like waiting time at public transport stop, or the parking costs at the destination, or if you have shared your trip with other persons, for example, this you can enrich in this survey. Usually, if you want to have only the commuting trip to the company and back, then maybe you have only 2 lines for this. But if you want to have the whole mobility of the day, then you repeat this question for the next day, for the next trip, and for the next trip, and for the next trip. And ask the people to fill in this trip diary. When we're talking about attitudes, usually we have open answers or pre-selected answers, so that we have some categories that people can decide to and rate, for example, for their importance or agree or disagree to specific statements. Then the first thing what we should think about ourselves is how we design the scale. If we have even or odd scale, so if we have an odd scale, then we have the option for the people, for example, if we say do not agree or agree on a specific statement, then you have a neutral position in the middle. If you have an even scale, then you have only tendency to agreeing or not agreeing options for the respondents. Another thing maybe to avoid, if you can score a different set of questions about their importance, maybe from points, for example, from 0 to 6 points, to avoid that respondents maybe rate everything with very important, give 6 points to every answer. You can also limit the points to spend and show he has to share and balance the points across a different set of answers, for example. You can also ask the respondents to rank them according to the importance, so you can drag and drop the different statements according to importance to sort them. With a tool, with digital tools, you can easily implement such an option in a survey, or for example tick the boxes for the most 3 important answers. That also you get some ranking from your survey. This is an example for an attitude. For example, do you see here is an even scale, so you have completely disagree and completely agree, so there is no middle option for the respondents. Try to have short and clear questions. As what is very important, try to avoid negative formulations, so that it's not clear for the respondents that the no is a no to the yes or yes to the no, or different the other way. And for example, here the design also helps the people not to lose the line. For example, if they want to fill in this is also some visual aids, but you can support the respondents that he's feel pleasant to fill in this questionnaire. Another example about the ratings, so that you have the scorings as I said before, and you have these points that you can spend, for example, different number. If you have 30 points on 10 questions, then the respondents need to balance these scores on the different statements according to its importance. Or as I said, you can also have different aspects like you see in the lower picture, and either you can drag and drop and sort this by the importance, or tick the most 2 important aspects, for example. The last thing I want to discuss in this part of the online course is the privacy issue. So privacy is an important thing you need to consider if you run a survey, to avoid that that you run in legal problems and legal issues. Especially as we have behavioral data and location-based data. If you're asking for mobility, we know very much about this individual who is responding to our survey, and if I know, for example, where he have been, I can also derive some information about his, I don't know, religion, his health situation, if you go, for example, to a hospital, or a political orientation, or this kind of thing. So think on that. So you need to have, including in your survey design, measures to protect against the data misuse. Of course, you have to tell the respondents what do you do to protect his data against misuse, and this is mainly that you should have protected directories with limited access where the data are stored. Usually you try to anonymize as soon as possible the data you generated, and so that not any individual information can be extracted from these data sets. For example, if you collect the names or the addresses, as soon as you don't need it anymore, you delete this information. And best, because usually you are not interested in a specific attitude from a specific person, but you always want to have a group or the total population's statements. And as soon as you combine this and analyze this in a descriptive manner, then you try to delete this data. Of course, you also have to inform the respondents before starting the survey that this is a survey. This survey is a voluntary thing. You can refuse to participate in the survey at all, or you can also refuse, only on specific questions. You also have to inform it which is the reason why you collect this data and for what this data is used for. And it's always recommendable before you open the questionnaire, for example, on an online questionnaire, that there is a box to tick that he's informed about all these aspects of the survey. And as I said already before, because if he or she is want to delete the information he has given to you, or she want to receive the information is stored about her or him, then you have to do this, and this creates, of course, some work. But this is still a rule only as soon as you are able to analyze the data. So if you anonymize this data and it's not possible anymore, even if this data from this person is included in your data set, then you do not need to do this. And maybe another hint, maybe it's necessary also to register the survey in a GDPR agency on national level, like is the most cases in throughout Europe. So thank you very much for listening to the second part, and I will also invite you to listen to the third part of this online course, and then we will discuss about the implementation of the survey itself and some aspects about the data analysis. Thank you very much for listening.